Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Joe and Mia have been married for 19 years. In the eyes of outsiders, they are an enviable model couple. Joe is a retired police officer who now runs his own contracting company. Mia, on the other hand, works as an administrative assistant for a multinational company. They have a smart and loving son, Oliver. The whole family lived in harmony and everything seemed so good. However, even the strongest fortresses can crack without notice. It was a normal Thursday evening, and Joe had just walked in the door tired from a long day at work. He looked around the room out of habit, searching for Mia. In the living room, Oliver is concentrating on his homework as a news program no one cares about plays on the television. Mia. Joe whispered his wife's name. "Here it is, dear." Mia's voice came from the kitchen, and Joe followed it. He saw Mia preparing dinner, and a tantalizing aroma filled the air. Joe stepped forward and gently wrapped his arm around his wife's waist, dropping a tender kiss on her cheek. "How was work today?" Mia asked with a smile, while skillfully flipping the ingredients in the pan. "Not bad," Joe shrugged. "It's just that one client was particularly picky and nearly drove me crazy. How about you?" Mia's expression suddenly became a little hesitant as she put down the spatula and turned to face Joe. "Actually, I wanted to tell you something." Joe raised an eyebrow, signaling her to continue. "I'm going out to dinner tonight with my coworker Ryan, and maybe some dancing," Mia said, watching her husband's reaction carefully. Joe's expression froze instantly. In all the years they've been married, Mia rarely goes out alone with her coworkers. What's more, he'd never heard of this Ryan. "Ryan?" Joe tried to sound calm. "Is it a new coworker? I don't think I've heard you mention it." Mia nodded. "Yes, he just came to the company last month. We worked together on a project and got along quite well." Joe felt a wave of unease spread through his heart. He subconsciously assumed Ryan was a female, but Mia's choice of words made him realize he might have thought wrong. "Him?" Joe frowned. "You're going out alone with a male coworker?" Mia sighed, as if she had anticipated her husband's reaction. "Joe, come on. Ryan's just a coworker. We're just going out to dinner and talking about work. Besides, we're all this age. What do you care about that?" Joe felt a surge of nameless anger. It's true that they're not getting any younger, but that doesn't mean he's okay with his wife being alone with other men. However, looking at Mia's slightly disappointed eyes, he couldn't bear to press on. "Okay." Joe finally compromised. "Where are you going to eat? When will you be back?" Mia breathed a sigh of relief. "We're going to go to that new Italian restaurant downtown. It shouldn't be too late." Joe nodded, trying to suppress the uneasiness in his mind. He told himself that Mia was an adult and had a right to socialize with her coworkers. But why did he always feel that it wasn't that simple? Dinner was served in a slightly awkward atmosphere. Oliver sensed something different between his parents, but the smart boy had the good sense not to ask more questions. Joe chewed his food absent-mindedly as images of Mia talking and laughing with a vague male figure kept popping into his mind. After dinner, Mia started getting ready to go out. She changed into an elegant black dress with a slight dusting of powder. Joe sat on the couch in the living room and pretended to watch TV, but in reality he watched his wife's every move with his afterglow. Just then, the doorbell rang. Joe jolted to his feet, striding toward the door. He opened the door to see a tall, handsome man standing outside with a friendly smile on his face. "Hello, I'm Ryan." The man held out his hand. "I'm here to pick up Mia." Joe stiffened and shook Ryan's hand, turning inside out. He had expected Ryan to drive to pick up Mia, but he didn't expect the other man to come to the door himself. The move made Joe even more uneasy. Mia came to the door at that moment and gave a big smile when she saw Ryan. "Ryan, you're right on time." Joe stood by and watched as his wife talked cordially with this strange man, the uneasiness in his heart gradually evolving into an unspeakable fear. He suddenly realized that he might be witnessing the moment when his marriage was cracking. "Mia." Joe finally spoke, a hint of pleading in his voice. "Are you sure you want to go?" Mia turned and looked her husband in the eye. She seemed to see the worry and unease in Joe's eyes, but she just shook her head gently. "Joe, we've already discussed this. I'm just going to have dinner with a coworker and won't be back too late." Joe opened his mouth to say something, but ultimately nothing came out. He watched as Mia took Ryan's arm and waved him goodbye before disappearing into the night. Closing the door, Joe felt a wave of loneliness and powerlessness he'd never felt before. He returned to the living room and sat mechanically on the couch, the program playing on the television turning into a buzz in his ears. Oliver carefully walked over to his father. "Dad, are you okay?" Joe forced a smile and rubbed his son's hair. "I'm fine, son. Go to your homework." Looking at his son's back as he left, Joe fell into deep thought. He and Mia have been married for 19 years and have weathered numerous storms. They used to think their relationship was indestructible, but at this moment, Joe feels a sense of crisis like no other. As the minutes ticked by, Joe's mood grew more and more irritable. He tries to distract himself with work, but the image of Mia and Ryan talking and laughing in the restaurant always comes to mind. He knew he shouldn't have second-guessed his wife like that, but the uneasy feeling lingered. Late at night, Joe is still sitting on the couch in the living room, his eyes fixed on the front door, waiting for Mia's return. However, time passed little by little, and Mia never came home. Joe picked up his cell phone and hesitated, but dialed Mia's number. The phone rang for a long time, but no one answered. He tried a few more times, and the results remained the same. Joe felt a wave of panic hit him as all sorts of horrible imagery flashed through his mind. He forced himself to calm down, telling himself that maybe Mia was just at the bar and didn't hear the phone ring. But why hasn't she even sent a text? Joe fidgeted and paced back and forth in the living room, unsure of what to do. He wanted to call the police, but was worried he was overreacting. After all, Mia is an adult and has the right to decide her own actions. And with that, Joe had a long and agonizing night. When the early morning sun shone through the curtains, Mia still hadn't come home. Joe sat exhausted on the couch with red eyes and stubble. He didn't know what to do next, how to explain to Oliver that his mom had been gone all night. More importantly, he doesn't know how to deal with a night that could change their marriage. Just then, his cell phone suddenly rang. Joe hastily grabbed his cell phone and saw an unfamiliar number displayed on the screen. His heart raced, wondering if what he was about to hear would be good or bad news. Joe took a deep breath and hit the answer button. The news from the other end of the phone would change his life forever. Mia sat in the dining room and looked across the table at Ryan with mixed emotions. She knows she shouldn't have come, but Ryan's charm and passion for his work make it hard to say no. The dining room is softly lit and the music is melodious, creating an ambiguous atmosphere. "Here's to the success of our program." Ryan raised his glass with a charming smile on his face. Mia hesitated, but picked up her own glass. "For the project." They clinked glasses and Mia took a small sip of red wine, feeling the warmth of the liquid as it slid down her throat. She couldn't help but think of Joe and wonder what he was doing now, and if he was still waiting for her to come home. Dinner was served in a pleasant atmosphere, with Ryan's witty remarks making Mia laugh from time to time. Despite some inner turmoil, Mia gradually relaxed. "Let's go dancing." After dinner, Ryan suggested, "I know a nice bar nearby." Mia wanted to say no, but seeing Ryan's expectant eyes, she nodded furtively. The bar was dimly lit, and the music was deafening. Mia felt a little uncomfortable, but Ryan seemed to be enjoying the environment. They found a corner and sat down, and Ryan went to the bar and ordered 2 cocktails. "It's the store's special." Ryan handed Mia a brightly colored drink. "Try it." Mia took the glass and took a careful sip. The flavor was a little strange, but not unpleasant. She didn't notice the eerie glint in Ryan's eye. As time went on, Mia felt more and more out of place. Her vision began to blur, she became dizzy, and her limbs became heavy. She tried to stand up, but found she could barely control her body. I'm not feeling well," Mia struggled to say, her voice slurring. Ryan looked at her with concern. "It's probably the alcohol. Let me take you home." Mia tried to refuse, but her consciousness was fading fast. She felt herself being helped up and stumbled out of the bar. Then a darkness enveloped her. When Mia opens her eyes again, she finds herself lying in a strange room. The sun shone through the curtains and stung her eyes. She tried to sit up, but felt soreness all over her body, and the discomfort coming from her lower body in particular woke her up instantly. Fear came over her like a tidal wave, and Mia shuddered as she looked over her body, realizing she was naked and covered in unfamiliar bruises and scratches. Memories flashed like fragments, the last images from the bar, Ryan's face, and a few blurry fragments. No, no, that's not possible. Mia mumbled, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. She struggled to her feet and found her clothes in her room, shivering as she put them on. Her cell phone was still in her bag, but it was dead. Mia has no idea where she is or what time it is. All she knew was that she had to get out of this horrible place. Stumbling out of the hotel, Mia stopped a cab. She hesitated and finally gave the hospital address instead of her home address. She curled up in the back seat and cried silently. Upon arrival at the hospital, Mia was immediately admitted to the emergency room. Doctors scrutinized her health and performed the necessary tests. When the test results came back, the doctor's expressions became serious. "Ms. Mia," a female doctor said softly, "we have detected components of a rape drug in your system. Based on the preliminary examination, it is likely that you have been sexually assaulted. We need to conduct further examinations and take evidence. Would you like us to notify the police?" Mia felt a wave of vertigo as she shook her head. "No, not the police. I just want to talk to my husband. His name is Joe." The doctor nodded. "Okay, we will contact your husband. In the meantime, we will provide you with the necessary medical care and psychological support." Joe was anxiously awaiting news of Mia at home when he received the call from the hospital. When he heard Mia was in the hospital, his heart almost stopped. He immediately drove to the hospital, rambling along the way, fearing the worst. Upon arrival at the hospital, Joe was taken to Mia's hospital room. Seeing his wife's pale face and empty eyes, Joe felt his heart cut to the bone. "Mia, honey," Joe said softly, taking her hand carefully. "What happened?" Mia looks at Joe and tears well up again. She broke off to tell what she could remember. Joe listened, feeling an intense wave of anger and powerlessness sweep over him. Just then, a detective walked in. "Hello, I'm Detective Harvey. We've been notified by the hospital that we need to know the specifics of the case." Joe frowned. "We haven't decided if we're going to call the police." Detective Harvey nodded. "I understand. However, I must tell you that prosecuting a case like this could cause more harm to your family. The media will be all over this case, and your privacy may be exposed." Joe felt a surge of anger. "You mean we should just let it go? Let that asshole get away with it?" Detective Harvey shook his head. "I'm just stating what might happen. The final decision is yours. However, if you decide to press charges, you have our full support." Mia looked at Joe and whispered, "I don't want to press charges. I just want to forget about it and start our lives over." Joe looked at his wife incredulously. "Mia, are you sure? That man should pay for his behavior." Mia closed her eyes in pain. "I know, but I don't want this to ruin our family. I don't want Oliver to know about it. I don't want to be the talk of the town. Please, Joe, let's just leave it at that." Joe felt a wave of powerlessness wash over him. He looked to Detective Harvey, who just shrugged. "It's your decision. If you change your minds, feel free to contact us." After Detective Harvey left, silence fell over the hospital room. Joe held Mia's hand and felt her trembling slowly subside. He knew that from this moment on, their lives would never be the same again. "We'll get through this." Joe finally broke the silence with determination in his voice. "I'll always be there for you, Mia. We'll get through this together." Mia looked into her husband's determined eyes and forced a weak smile. She knew the road ahead was long and hard, but at least she wasn't fighting alone. What neither of them realize, however, is that this horrible night not only destroys Mia's trust, but also plants a ticking time bomb in their marriage. The days ahead will bring more challenges and trials, and it's still unknown whether their love will be able to weather the storm. As night falls again, Joe watches over a sleeping Mia, filled with conflicting emotions. He loves Mia and wants to protect her, but at the same time he feels an uncanny anger and betrayal. He knew these negative emotions were irrational, but he couldn't help how he felt. Joe looks out the window into the night and realizes that their marriage is standing at a crossroads. How will they deal with this trauma in the days to come? How to rebuild trust? How do I explain to Oliver what happened? These questions swirled in Joe's mind. making him feel more confused and helpless than ever. But at the moment, Joe can only hold Mia's hand tightly and pray silently in the darkness. Pray that they will find the strength and courage to face the challenges ahead together. Praying that their love will overcome this terrible shadow. Praying that one day they can truly let go of this nightmare and embrace happiness again. Joe and Mia sat in the counselor's office with an unspoken tension in the air. This is the third time they have come here to try to save their precarious marriage with professional help. The counselor was a middle-aged woman whose gentle gaze swept back and forth between the couple. "Today, let's talk about how you feel." The counselor said softly, "Joe, you go first." Joe took a deep breath and tried to organize his words. I feel angry," he finally said, his voice revealing long-suppressed emotions, not just to that asshole Ryan, but to Mia, to myself. "I know it's wrong, but I can't help it." Mia sat with her head down and her fingers twisted together nervously. She could feel the pain in Joe's words, and it made her heart even heavier. "Mia, what about you?" the counselor asked gently. Mia looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "I am ashamed," she whispered. "Every time Joe looks at me, I feel dirty and unworthy of his love. I know what happened wasn't my fault, but I just can't shake the feeling." Joe's heart stung when he heard that. He wanted to reach out and comfort Mia, but eventually refrained. This distance made him feel even more frustrated. The counselor nodded. "These feelings are normal. You have been through a trauma, and it will take time to heal. It's important to be honest about these emotions rather than repressing them." Joe and Mia continued to attend counseling over the next few weeks. They learned to express their feelings better and try to understand each other's pain. However, despite all their efforts, the cracks in their marriage seem to be growing. Joe finds himself beginning to be suspicious of Mia's every move. Joe felt a pang of unease whenever Mia mentioned going out to meet friends or coworkers. He knew the reaction was irrational, but he couldn't control his imagination. Mia, on the other hand, feels suffocated by Joe's overprotectiveness. She longs to regain her freedom and independence, but every time she sees Joe's worried eyes, she feels a pang of guilt. One night, after another heated argument, Mia breaks down. "I can't stand it, Joe," she cried. "I know you're doing me a favor, but I feel like a prisoner. I need space and a life of my own." Joe stood there, feeling both angry and helpless. "I was just trying to protect you, Mia, that I couldn't let something like that happen again. Did I do something wrong?" Mia shook her head, unable to stop the tears. "You didn't do anything wrong, Joe. But we've all changed. Maybe we need some time apart to calm down." Joe felt a wave of panic. "You mean separation?" Mia nodded. "Maybe it's for the best for both of us. We need time to sort out our feelings and figure out what we want." Joe wants to object, wants to convince Mia to stay. But looking into his wife's tired and pained eyes, he realized that maybe it really was for the best. "Okay," Joe finally said, frustration in his voice. "If that's what you want, I respect your decision." With that, Joe and Mia began a life of separation. Joe moved out of the house and rented a small apartment. They agreed to take turns caring for Oliver in an effort to minimize the impact of the change on their son. During their separation, both Joe and Mia went through a difficult period of self-reflection. Joe realizes that his overprotectiveness actually stems from a fear of losing Mia. He began to learn to let go and give Mia more space and trust. Mia, for her part, is slowly coming out of her trauma through personal therapy. She rediscovered her self-worth and began to rebuild her self-confidence. She realized that while that terrible night had changed her forever, she was not defeated. However, as time passes, both Joe and Mia realize that their marriage may not be able to go back to the way it was. That night destroyed not only Mia's trust, but the bond between them. 2 years later, Joe and Mia sat in their attorney's office and calmly signed their divorce papers. Despite the sadness in their hearts, they both knew that this was probably for the best. "I'm sorry things ended up like this," Joe said softly, looking into Mia's eyes. Mia smiled and shook her head. "No need to apologize, Joe. We all did our best. Sometimes love isn't enough." They agreed to share custody of Oliver, and Joe gave Mia the house until Oliver came of age. Me.You received a $250,000 settlement from the company, while Ryan was fired for his behavior. As they left the attorney's office, Joe and Me.You stood on the sidewalk, momentarily at a loss for words. Finally, Me.You gently hugged Joe. "Thank you for everything over the years," she said. "I hope you find happiness." Joe nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "You too, Me.You. You deserve the best." Watching Me.Yu's back disappear around the corner, Joe felt a pang of deep sadness. 19 years of marriage was over, and all the laughter, tears, and memories would be in the past. But he also knew that it was probably the best option for both of them. Joe took a deep breath and turned in the opposite direction. Although the future was uncertain, he knew he had to move on. After all, life is such that even in the darkest moments, we must find the courage and strength to go on living. That night, Joe sat in his small apartment and thought back over the past few years. He thought about his first date with Mia, their wedding, the joy when Oliver was born. Then he thought about the night that changed everything and the pain and struggle that came with it. Joe opened a bottle of whiskey and poured himself a glass. He knew alcohol wasn't the answer, but at the moment he just wanted to escape reality for a while. Joe felt a strange calm as the alcohol kicked in. He suddenly realizes that despite losing Mia, he hasn't lost everything. He still has Oliver and his career and a chance to start over. Over the next few months, Joe struggled to adjust to his new life. He stayed in close contact with Oliver and was involved in his son's life as much as possible. At the same time, he began to get back into work, filling the emptiness inside with busyness. Mia is also trying to rebuild her life. She went back to work and started making new friends. Though still traumatized inside, she is slowly learning to live with it. One day, a year later, Joe meets Mia by chance at the supermarket. They froze at each other for a moment, then greeted each other awkwardly. "You're looking good," Joe said, trying to keep his tone light. Mia nodded. "Thanks, you too. How's Oliver?" "He's fine," Joe replied. "We went to the amusement park together last weekend and he had a great time." They chatted for a few minutes and then said their goodbyes. Joe looked at Mia's departing back with mixed feelings. He realizes that even though they are no longer a couple, they will always be connected because of Oliver. As time passes, Joe and Mia are both moving forward on their own paths. They learned how to continue to be parents after the divorce and work together for Oliver's happiness. Although they still feel pain and regret at times, they are both trying to let go of the past and embrace a new life. One Saturday morning, 2 years after the divorce, Joe sat in the kitchen of his small apartment, slowly savoring the freshly brewed coffee. Sunlight poured in through the windows, adding a touch of warmth to the room. Joe's eyes fell on a family photo hanging on the wall, taken shortly before he and Mia divorced. In the photo, their son Oliver is smiling broadly, while Joe and Mia's smiles look a little forced. Joe sighed, thinking back to the last 2 years. After the divorce, he went through a difficult adjustment period. At times, he would feel the pain of losing Mia. At other times, he would feel relief at regaining his freedom. But what hurt him the most was seeing Oliver struggle through this turn of events. However, as time went on, things started to get better. Joe and Mia learned how to continue being parents after a divorce and work together for Oliver's happiness. They forge a new relationship, no longer husband and wife, but still friends and parents to Oliver. Joe's thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his cell phone. "It's Mia calling." "Joe, can you come pick up Oliver? I have an important appointment today, and the babysitter I had scheduled has canceled at short notice." Mia's voice held a hint of apology and anticipation. Joe froze for a moment, then replied, "Sure, no problem. I'll be there in 10 minutes. After hanging up the phone, Joe felt a wave of mixed emotions come over him. He knew that the important date Mia had mentioned probably had something to do with her new boyfriend. Even though it's been 2 years, Joe feels a twinge of discomfort at the thought of Mia with another man. On the drive to Mia's house, Joe tried to adjust his mind. He reminds himself that he and Mia are no longer married and that they each have the right to pursue new happiness. Upon arriving at Mia's house, Joe rings the doorbell. The door was opened by a strange man, about 40 years old, with a friendly smile. "Hello, you must be Joe? I'm Mark." The man held out his hand. "Mia told me about you." Joe fought back his inner discomfort and politely shook Mark's hand. Just then, Mia and Oliver appear in the doorway. "Dad!" Oliver excitedly pounces on Joe. Joe held his son close, feeling the warmth and attachment. He glanced up at Mia and realized she was looking at Mark tenderly. That look was all too familiar to Joe. Once upon a time, Mia had looked at him the same way. "Thanks for coming, Joe." Mia says, "We'll be back around 7 p.m. Is that okay?" Joe nodded. "No problem, have fun." Watching Mia and Mark's back as they left, Joe felt a pang of loss. But that emotion quickly dissipated again when he looked down at Oliver's excited face. "Well, little one, what are we going to do today?" Joe asked with a smile. The following day, Joe took Oliver to an amusement park and the two had a great time. Joe felt a deep sense of fulfillment as he watched the big smile on his son's face. He realized that despite the loss of his marriage, he had not lost the joys and responsibilities of fatherhood. In the evening, Joe drops Oliver off at home just in time to meet Mia and Mark returning. Oliver excitedly recounted the day's adventures to his mom while Joe stood by, smiling and listening. Just as Joe was about to leave, Mark suddenly said, "Joe, would you like to come in for a cup of coffee?" The invitation came as a bit of a surprise to both Joe and Mia. Joe hesitated, but saw Mark's sincere look and nodded his head yes. The atmosphere was slightly awkward as the four men sat in the living room. Mark took the initiative to break the silence and started asking Joe about his work and interests. Gradually, the conversation lightened up. Joe was surprised to find that Mark was a great guy to be around. He was gentle, funny, and very kind to Oliver. Watching the natural interaction between Mia and Mark, Joe felt a mixture of emotions. He was happy that Mia had found a good mate, but at the same time felt a twinge of loss. After leaving Mia's house, Joe drives back to his apartment. He sat on the couch, thinking back over the events of the day. He realized that he might finally be ready to let go of the past and actually move on. Just then, Joe's cell phone rang. It's a text from Alicia asking if he's free for lunch tomorrow. Joe looked at the screen of his cell phone, an involuntary smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Alicia was met by Joe at a company party. She's a single mom with a daughter about Oliver's age. The two shared experiences that they quickly resonated with each other. Joe replied with an "okay" and put his phone down, breathing a sigh of relief. He felt something inside him slowly changing. Perhaps this is the beginning of a new life. Joe and Alicia's relationship grew steadily over the next few months. They often took their respective children on trips together, and the four of them got along well. Joe finds himself looking forward to his time with Alicia more and more. Meanwhile, Joe and Mia's relationship is getting easier. They learn how to stay friends after the divorce and work together for Oliver's happiness. Sometimes they even attend Oliver's school events with their respective new partners. One day, Joe meets Mia and Mark by chance at the supermarket. Seeing them pushing their shopping carts and having a good time, Joe was surprised to find he didn't feel jealous or uncomfortable. On the contrary, he was heartily happy for Mia. "Hi, Joe." Mia smiled in greeting. "It's Oliver's birthday next Saturday, and we're planning a small party. Can you and Alicia come?" Joe nodded. "Sure, we'll be there." Watching Mia and Mark's departing back, Joe felt a sense of relief. He realizes that even though their marriage is over, they are still a family, just in a different way. Joe lay in bed that night, thinking back over the past few years. He has traveled a long and difficult road from his initial pain and struggle to his current peace and acceptance. Joe understands that there are no perfect endings in life, only constant beginnings. And he, for one, was ready for the next beginning. With that thought in mind, Joe closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Tomorrow, it will be a brand new day. Joe stood in front of the mirror, carefully straightening his tie. It's Oliver's birthday party, and he wants to look presentable. His reflection in the mirror put him in a trance. The middle-aged man's eyes seemed to be steeped in so many stories. Joe took a deep breath and thought back to all the changes over the past few years. Life after divorce wasn't as horrible as he first thought. Sure, it was tough at first, but over time he slowly found a new balance. Joe is beginning to understand that sometimes an end is a new beginning. Yet, even in this calm, a dark fire burns in Joe's heart. That's revenge on Ryan. Joe never mentioned it to Mia, but he did find multiple ways to get back at the man who ruined his marriage. First, Joe uses his status and network of connections as an ex-cop to embark on a stealthy but effective campaign of revenge. He secretly investigates Ryan's background and discovers that the ostensibly glamorous businessman actually has quite a few unseemly dealings. Joe carefully gathered evidence and then anonymously leaked this information to Ryan's business rivals and the authorities. The results were disastrous. Ryan's company was embroiled in a string of legal battles and financial crises. His reputation is in tatters in the business world, and his former partners are cutting him off in droves. Joe hears that Ryan had to sell his mansion to pay for legal fees and may even face jail time. But Joe wasn't satisfied with that. He found a few reliable friends who owed him favors. Late one night, they waited outside the bar Ryan frequented. When Ryan walks out drunk, they drag him to a hidden alley. "This is for Joe and Mia," one of them whispered, then hit Ryan hard in the stomach. Over the next few minutes, Ryan takes a hard beating. When it was over, he was lying on the ground, bruised, but afraid to call the police because he knew who was behind it. "Remember this lesson," Joe's friend warns before leaving. "If you dare hurt any more innocent people, it will be worse next time." Joe wasn't personally involved in the operation, but as he heard the detailed debriefing, a complex thrill surged through him. He knows the revenge may not be noble enough, but Joe can't deny the inner satisfaction of seeing the man who ruined his marriage punished. Ryan had taken away what Joe held most dear, and now Joe was giving him a taste of what it would be like to lose everything. The retaliation may not have been honorable enough, but Joe felt it was the punishment Ryan deserved. Despite this, Joe chooses to bury this secret deep in his heart and never mention it to anyone. Some justice, he knew, could only be achieved quietly in the shadows. Joe's thoughts are interrupted by the doorbell. He opened the door to see Alicia standing outside, holding a carefully wrapped gift. "Ready?" Alicia asked gently. Joe nodded. "Well, come on." Together they drove to Mia's house. On the way, Joe couldn't help but think of Ryan again. The last he'd heard of Ryan was a few months ago, when it was rumored that Ryan had left the city to start over somewhere else. Joe doesn't know if he should feel happy or guilty about this. By the time we arrived at Mia's house, the party had already started. The yard was filled with laughter and colorful balloons fluttering in the wind. Oliver ran over excitedly as soon as he saw Joe. "Dad, you're here." Oliver gave Joe a big hug. Joe crouched down and leveled himself with his son. "Happy birthday, my little guy. Look who's got a surprise for you." He pointed to Alicia behind him. Oliver's eyes lit up. "Aunt Alicia." He runs over and hugs Alicia warmly. Joe stands up and sees Mia approaching with Mark. The four adults smiled at each other, and the atmosphere was relaxed and friendly. "Thank you for coming," Mia says. "Oliver keeps asking when you guys are arriving." Joe nodded. "How could we miss such an important day?" The party went well. Joe's heart filled with happiness as he watched Oliver play with the other children. He realizes that even though his and Mia's marriage ended, they still managed to create a loving environment for Oliver. Later in the evening, when the kids have gone off to play a game, Joe finds himself alone in the kitchen with Mia. They sorted through the dishes together, as tacitly as they had done years ago. "Joe," Mia spoke up suddenly, "did you hear about Ryan?" Joe felt his heart racing and tried to stay calm. "What is it?" Mia sighed. "I heard he's been in a lot of trouble lately. I just feel it's sad, you know? Despite all that's happened, it's still sad to see someone's life get hard like that." Joe was silent for a moment, then said softly, "Maybe this is karma." Mia glanced at Joe as if she wanted to say something, but eventually just nodded. Just then, Mark walked into the kitchen. He looked over at Joe and Mia and smiled gently. "Need any help?" Joe and Mia looked at each other and both laughed. "Come on," Joe says, "one more is always good." The three of them cleaned up the kitchen together and talked about their lives. Joe is surprised to find that he is so comfortable with Mia and her new partner. He realized that time is indeed the best medicine. After the party, Joe and Alicia say goodbye to the others and get ready to leave. Oliver clung reluctantly to Joe's leg. "Daddy, when are you coming back?" Joe knelt down and gently stroked his son's hair. "Soon, I promise. We'll go fishing next weekend, okay?" Oliver nodded excitedly, then turned and ran to Mia. On the drive home, Joe was deep in thought. He looks back on his life, from meeting Mia, to their marriage, to the current situation. He remembered his revenge on Ryan, and that complex emotion came back to him. Joe looked at Alicia beside him, and a warmth welled up in his heart. He knew that he was taking his new life slowly and cautiously. Although the future is still full of uncertainty, Joe has learned to appreciate the present moment and the people around him. When he got home, Joe stood in front of the window and looked at the stars in the night sky. He remembered the night that changed everything and the pain and struggle that came with it. But he also remembers how, step by step, he came out of his haze and found meaning in his life again. Joe sighed deeply, feeling a peace he had never felt before. He knows that life is like a book. Each page is a new beginning. He, on the other hand, is getting ready to turn over a new chapter in his life. There may still be challenges ahead, but Joe is ready. He has learned how to balance in a storm and how to find light in the darkness. Whatever awaits him ahead, Joe has the confidence to face it. Because he understands that true happiness does not lie in having a perfect life, but in learning to appreciate every moment of life, whether it be joyful or sad. Joe smiled and closed his eyes, looking forward to tomorrow. After all, every tomorrow is a fresh start. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.